But in the club is never what I want. It's never what the coach wants. It's never what the director of scouting wants. It's a combination of what the club wants. We sit down. We always sit down. This was with Luccin, this was with Nico, and this will be with Peter.
Yeah. Woo. Ooh. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree, the podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com. Celebrate Pride Month with the FC Dallas Pride pre-match jersey, available now in-store and online. But buy before this weekend because the supply is limited. Also, of course, Soccer90.com has all the European stuff, Copa America stuff. They got it all. And as a listener of Third Degree, the podcast, you get 20% off on your order, both in-store or online. Use the code Third Degree online. Tell them we sent you on the podcast and get that discount. Some exclusions do apply. Third Degree, the podcast is also brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm for wills, trust, probates, and business law. Call 469-515-2559 or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode 267. By the way, remember that number. It's going to become important here in a few minutes. Of Third Degree, the podcast. Hello, it is me, Peter, and talking about the big news of the week alongside is first off Dan Crooke. Howdy, Dan.
Hello, welcome to the new era. Do you feel the energy?
Yes, I feel the energy. Thank you for asking. And your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Peter, man, I'm just like you. I'm fired up to talk about for the first 30 minutes of this podcast about the 1-1 tie in Minnesota. I'm looking forward to that breakdown.
Well, I am a little punchy because I just watched the U.S. tie Brazil in the final friendly before the Copa, and that's probably the best I've seen the United States play in a really long time, and what a nice response to the opposite performance they had against Colombia the other day.
Right.
We'll see how the Copa go for the United States here in the next few weeks. All right, Buzz. So on the heels of the aforementioned absolutely morbid 1-1 draw on Saturday up in Minnesota, a performance so bad, once I saw some of the visual graphics of the stats of it, I decided not to watch it because I didn't watch it live. That is a Dallas team featuring probably its the best lineup it could put out there considering its injury situation versus essentially Minnesota's B team. The number of guys Minnesota rolled out there that had played less than 500 minutes this year was unbelievable. And just by all accounts, Buzz, really a new low in terms of just boring awfulness from FC Dallas and Nico.
Yeah, it's interesting that this team insists on playing out of the back on the ground when they don't really have any great elite passers in the back. 6 of the 7 guys in the back are just average passers or worse. Only Armendi's an above average passer, and really they have no midfield to speak of at all in terms of creating. So it's like you have these guys that on paper are some good strikers. And they just can't get the ball. Dallas just can't get the ball up the field into those guys because they just don't have enough talent on the rest of the field in terms of playing the way they want to play. Like they have guys that could just boot it up there, but they don't do that. So you end up with one of the most boring games you've ever seen, and from a Dallas perspective, and an XG that is just absolutely minuscule, and a number of shots that's very low, and it just really is a very flat, terrible performance. Not because of this single performance, because of the year-long evaluation, we ended up with the news we ended up with.
So on Sunday, buried in the Sunday news drama, was that Luccin Gonzalez had been fired, or excuse me.
I was going to say, not Luccin Gonzalez.
Sorry. I'm don't cut that out, because the irony of all of that is that everything in the way that the club announced Nico Estevez's firing was essentially a carbon copy of 3 years ago when they fired Luccin, down to the press release. Did you see the image, the screen grabs of the two?
Cut and paste, yeah.
Yes, unbelievable.
Yeah.
it was essentially the exact same press release. And then came the press conference, which I felt like at the end of sounded and looked just like the press conference at the end after they fired Luccin 3 years ago. It was unbelievable.
Similar, yeah. There's only one major difference, and we'll get to it in a minute.
Yes. So anyway, the point being is that Nico Estevez was announced to have, and by the way, it was they made it sound like it was a mutual agreement to part ways. I don't remember the actual phrase used. It was, what was it, Dan? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I just called it a departure.
Yeah. What was the phrase? I'm gonna find it one more time. Just announce the departure of it. Wasn't sacked or fired or whatever. It was the same thing they used last time, and it was very shady.
Yeah, part ways,
Yeah, and all of the niceties that come along with that. So, Dan, where were you when you found out that Nico had lost his job?
So I was writing an article that's going to come out tomorrow, and I was really deep in it, and I had to go and check for an email from FC Dallas. I opened up my Gmail account, and I was like, that's weird. There's an FC Dallas email sitting there. And then I saw Nico Estevez has departed as head coach 30 minutes ago, and I was like, well, crap, I missed that one.
And Buzz, of course, something like this happens and you're out of town.
Yeah, it's out of town and working. I was literally on the air when it happened. If anyone wants more departures to happen or more moves to happen, just wait, because I'm going to leave town in the middle of the next window. Lined it up perfectly within a couple of days, so everyone will be good.
It's like clockwork. It's science.
Every summer.
Buzz goes out of town. Things happen with FC Dallas. Yeah, so guys, here's the thing, and we can get into all of the details about all of this stuff, is I just want to get back to a point that relates to the performance of this team, not just in the Minnesota game, but in the 2 games prior that I saw in LA in person, and all the other things, the losing the 3-goal lead against Salt Lake, and I mean, the list of this season goes on and on. Do either of you really believe that there is enough working parts on this team right now for this season to be salvaged in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah. So they kind of talked about almost like a mini season. I've got the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup quarterfinal. You've got at least 2 Leagues Cup games and a chance to get into that. Dan specified that there's 5? Is it 5 games? 3. Right, be quarter, semi. 3 games left to effectively win the Open Cup and get a Champions Cup spot. So salvageable in that sense, yes. Salvageable in the sense of being competitive in MLS, getting a really good playoff spot and making a run, no.
I'm going to answer. I have a response, but I want to hear Buzz's thought first.
Sure. I think that if you change formations and you play with more offensive players on the field and less pure defensive players, maybe bring in some fresh legs here and there, using some kids to give some guys some games off so you can play as a collective better over the stretch. I think you can make this team into a team that is as talented as the bottom 2 or 3 teams in the playoff picture. So that's like 8th or 9th in the standings kind of talent level. The problem is that even with half the season left, you're already 7 games out of the last playoff spot. And most other teams in MLS don't just turn to garbage. You have 3 teams between you and the last playoff spot, and then you have a couple of teams that are in that section of the playoff spots, and getting ahead of all those teams is very, very difficult, even with half the season left. So I don't know that you can really salvage it. Even if you get to that last playoff spot, what are you really salvaging? Other than the bragging rights of saying we made the playoffs again, it's not like you're going to have a team that's going to compete for the playoffs. So
it feels a little bit like Miami last year when they had that, was it 14 games to go and they were like 10 points off. They still missed the playoffs by 9 points. I think it's going to be way more entertaining. I think it's going to be an attractive style of football. But temper your expectations for success.
Yeah, generally speaking, we used to say that you had to get to like 50-something points, roughly, 50, 51, maybe 54, depending on the season, to be in the playoffs. Now we have 9 teams, so maybe it's a tiny bit less than that. That's 40 points away, basically. So you'd have to have 40 points out of your last, half of the season, when Salt Lake City right now in first place only has 33 total. So you probably don't need to get 54, but what are you going to do?
Last year it was 44 and 43 for the two
So
conferences.
are you going to get 30 points out of the second half of the season when the best team in the West only got 33 out of the first half of the season? So, the chance that you're actually going to be able to get into the playoffs, despite the fact that they want to talk about teams that have rallied in the second half, is just extraordinary. The math is just extraordinarily difficult. It's just almost impossible. The math is already. Should you try? Of course you should try. Will they be able to? I don't know. I think they're going to focus a lot on the Leagues Cup and the U.S. Open Cup, frankly, and try and use that as the salvage this season kind of ballywhack and try and rearrange their schedule and play guys to field their best teams for those tournaments.
One of the things that I find frustrating about this, and the reason why I asked the curious to take note of this episode number at 267, was this note. We did this exact same podcast on September 20th of 2021. That was 138 podcasts ago and less than 1,000 days ago. It was 993 days between firings of these two guys. That is not a long amount of time. And this team now is back at square one after 2 consecutive 3-season and out kind of runs with very low experience managers. And the only difference in my mind this time is that they didn't wait till the end of the season. And I do wonder if maybe the silver lining of this is they learned the lesson of waiting too long to fire Luccin by letting Nico Estevez go at this point versus dragging it out even further.
My complaint about that is that they're effectively giving Luccin a tryout in a sense of like trying to give him the rest of the season to try and win now. I'm not sure that using the rest of the season to win now is actually the best idea for this club. It might have been a better idea to just go ahead and get on with whoever the next coach is and start building for that coach's run, not trying to salvage whatever's left in this run.
Well, do you think is there a chance that A, they think that Luccin is a legitimate candidate, or B, do they maybe have somebody in mind that wouldn't be available till next season anyway?
Well, A, for sure. Luccin is 100% a legitimate candidate for, of course, in the press conference, they did the line about it's a global search. We will be doing a search while he's coaching. We will get all these international candidates. Our job is a highly coveted job. It's not. None of those things are really true. They're only true because they claim they're true. We're going to end up with the same candidates we always end up with here. So there are some candidates that are very viable. And I think because Luccin is getting the whole year, I think we can wait and talk about who candidates might be as we go forward to some of these pockets in the future. But, if they really are giving him a chance to try out, he has to play for the now. He really does have to try and win them all. And that isn't necessarily the best thing is for this team. Sometimes the best thing for the team is to go 1-15 so you get the number 1 pick. I mean, it's to use a Dallas Cowboys parlance. In the case of FC Dallas, the number 1 pick isn't worth all that much. But I'm not sure that like going out and trying to get guys to fix this season is the right play. You know what I mean? The best play might be to go out and look for guys that are going to be for the next coach for the next 3 or 4 years. And that's hard to do if you don't have that coach in place, if you don't know who that is. Like you're going to let Luccin, let's say he's not the guy, just hypothetically. You're going to let Luccin have his input into this next window and pick players that are not for him. It's just, I'm not sure that trying to salvage the season is the right play, but it's what they're doing. So let's go. Yeah, FC Dallas, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's an additional question in there that I'm fascinated by this question, which is knowing that this club is going to be playing in a stadium for the next 3 seasons, all of 2025, 2026, and 2027, in a stadium that will functionally be at least half closed for 3 straight seasons. How much does that play into the type of person they hire for those seasons? or alternatively, or maybe in parallel, the type of person even interested in taking that job, considering you're having half, you've got a stadium that's only half open.
I think that the kind of candidates that this team would attract anyway will not be affected by the fact that the stadium would be half open. You know what I mean? Like, we already know this is a, relatively speaking, not one of the higher paid jobs in the league. We know that, relatively speaking, people know that it's hot here. They know that you have the Huts aren't going to buy these $15-30 million players. You know that you have to have the pathway to the youth. Nico tried to ignore that. Look what it got him. So people know what this job is, and so I don't think that the kind of candidates we've seen this club hire will care that this or maybe they care, but they won't consider that like a major deficit compared to the other things they have to fight through here.
Dan, are you glad this has happened and happened now?
It makes the season more interesting. Obviously we build a rapport with Nico. It's never happy when you see coaches leave. It's kind of sad pulling out of the after the press conference, and I just see him walking out of the admin office. I guess, getting his stuff. I was like, yeah, that sucks. But I'm excited to see what comes of it, what the next steps are for FC Dallas. It's a constant evolution, right?
So, Buzz, what's your general reaction to the timing of Nico's firing?
It's certainly not surprising. When you're having discussions about how close this season is to the worst season of all time, you know that something was inevitable. You're right. I mean, unless he'd had a complete reversal of fortune. And there were no signs that was going to happen because he was sticking to his guns, and his insistence on the formation and maybe the insistence on the players he was picking were essentially what led to his downfall. So the timing of it for me is, once you decide that he's not the guy, then great, go ahead and do it. I'm okay with that. I still think there are some significant problems happening at this club that have to be addressed, that are going to make it hard for somebody to turn this thing around really quickly. But the part that does bother me is the idea that I know that they want to give Luccin this tryout, but I actually wish they would just get on with it. Like I talked before, if it is going to be Luccin, I'm not anti-Peter Luccin. I think he's a viable candidate. He is 100% one of the candidates. If you decide 3 or 4 or 5 weeks from now that he is the guy and then your other candidates aren't working out, just give him the full-time job and go. And don't go through this next window without a guy on your staff as your head lead guy. Don't go through this next window as the interim guy. Don't go through the rest of this season with an interim guy, because even if you are all in on both of the cups, and so maybe your regular season games aren't as important, well, those are great chances to play a bunch of young kids and see what you've got. What a golden opportunity to be able to, with little risk, play guys that you're not 100% sure about and see if you can get something out of them, see if there is something viable there. But they have a fair number of these kids that have not gotten any minutes, and you might as well take a look at them if you can. And so really there's a golden opportunity here if you really had your next coach that I kind of think they're wasting a little bit by sticking with an interim for the rest of the season.
My great nightmare is that we're about to find out that Nico Estevez isn't stupid and wasn't crazy, and what he was really trying to do, as we've talked about multiple times, is the reason why he insisted his team play so negatively and so in such a grinding manner, is because that was the only way they were ever going to get any kind of result. And somebody else is going to step in here and try to play 4 in the back, or something a little bit more forward-footed, and we're going to find out that this thing just really crumbles in just a different way.
Pete, clearly the plot twist that's going to happen is it's Eric Quill, and he just said, "Hey, let me win USL Championship, and then I'll come next season."
Well, one thing I will say about, generally speaking, with coaches in the past, particularly guys that have become interims, if you go to another coach and say, "Hey, could you get better results out of this team?" Absolutely, I can. Every coach believes that they can coach guys up. Sure. They always think that I'm going to come in there and you give me the exact same players and I will do better than the guy before. But you guys know how I feel. It's always about the players. So Peter Luccin has the exact same roster that Nico Estevez has. Peter Luccin can make some changes and make small differences. As I say, maybe you can be as good as 3 or 4 places in front of you. You can't make this team overnight as good as LAFC or Salt Lake City or Minnesota's is just by going, rah, guys, let's go. Let's show some energy. I mean, you have to, there's a reason why when a new coach is really named to be the head guy, we then talk about 3 or 4 season cycles, and it takes time to overturn and overhaul the roster and get the guys you want to play the way you want. You don't immediately walk in and become like a guy. So that's why, to me, like, why are we wasting time as a group with this let Peter win half a season kind of stuff? If he's the guy, make him the guy, let him go. Let's start with the next thing. Why are we waiting and throwing away half a season?
Well, as a bonus feature of this particular episode, we've pulled some audio from the press conference with Dan Hunt and Andre Zanata because I think we all agree there was some really wonderful little Dan Hunt moments in this particular one. It probably topped with this particular answer, Buzz. We all know Dan tends to overpromise and underdeliver. That's pretty much his MO. But he also is one of the most hyperbolic people of all time. And I don't remember what the original question was that delivered this answer, Buzz. Do you remember about his opinion on the roster?
Oh, somebody asked him if it was the best roster they've ever had.
Yes, so here was Dan's answer to that.
I would think so with a healthy Alan Velasco, right? We were unfortunate. If you look at the missing part of our salary cap for the first part of the season, Jesus, Allen, Paxton, Sebastian Leggett. I mean, there was...
Giovanni.
Yeah, Giovanni out. We've been missing a ton of our payroll and a lot of our most talented players. I think when we're 100% healthy, it's an incredibly talented roster.
Yeah. So here's the thing. If you're having a discussion with the record for the worst record of all time, there is no way in hell you have the most talented roster you've ever had with any reasonable coach to be in that category if it is true. It doesn't matter how many injuries you have.
No, I completely agree with you.
One little caveat to it is the question came from, you said previously that you think this season is the most talented roster that you've ever seen at FC Dallas. Do you still think that's true?
Yeah, and I believe
Which
we
is
laughed
a hard
at him.
One to backtrack on.
Well, we also giggled when he said it, when he answered that question that way the first time, because even if everybody is healthy, it is one of the better rosters in this club's history, but I don't think it's the best in this club's history.
No.
I kind of put it in the middle. I actually did a little digging. You want me to throw you out some couple of rosters? I have 3 candidates for best roster in club history. That's 1999 when Durr loaded up, 2006, which is the wire-to-wire first place team under Colin Clark, and then 2016 Oscars double winning season. So 99, here's your front strikers. Kreis, all-time MLS great. Ariel Graziani played for Ecuador. Dante Washington, who played for the United States. Mickey Trotman, who played for TNT. Bobby Ryan was a rookie. And JJ Treyes, who was a Colombian they signed, who I would have ahead of people like Ansa already. So that's 5 or 6 guys deep better. Midfield, Chad Deering played in the World Cup, one of the first Americans to play in Germany. Mark Seidentel, like a decade-long U.S. player. Brian Hayes played for TNT. Oscar Rip played for Colombia in the Valderrama, Leonel Alvarez era. Ted Eck, one of your guys. Right.
Oh, the GOAT?
Yeah, the GOAT. Yeah. Defense, Zarco played for El Salvador for years. Richard Fair, Eric Dade, an indoor superstar, played like 500 professional games. Paul Broom, Brandon Ploward, who was an Olympic team player for the United States. Mark Dodd, MLS Keeper of the Year. Matt Jordan was just coming into his prowess there, good enough to unseat the MLS Keeper of the Year. Amazing team, significantly better than this team we have right now. Okay, 2006, Colin Clark wire to first place, right? Front 2 strikers, Carlos Ruiz and Kenny Cooper. Played for the United States, played for Guatemala, right? Roberto Mina played for Ecuador. Adam Maduro played for Ghana. That's 4 internationals. 5th guy, Abe Thompson. And that's the weakest part. Go into midfield. Richard Mulrooney played for the United States. Ramon Nunez played for Honduras in the World Cup. Ronnie O'Brien played for Ireland and Juventus. Miguel Zaragoza, the Brazilian. Simon Valacari played for Finland. Dax McCarty, USA. Arturo Alvarez, USA. That's like 7 internationals. Defense, Clarence Goodson, USA. Chris Bondi won the Herman. Greg Vanny played for the United States. Bobby Ryan was converting to back. Drew Moore played for the United States. In goal, Dario Sala. Big-time keeper, one of the better ones we've had here. Okay, 2016. Michael Barrios, Maxi Urruti, Fabian Castillo, Mario Rosales, Carlos Ruiz. Again, substantial international players. Midfield, Carlos Grazo played in the World Cup at 18. Mauro Diaz, one of the best players we've ever seen here. Kellen Acosta in his prime, and then backed up by guys like Paxson and Victor Yola. And the defense in 2016, Hedges, United States player, Zimmerman, United States player, Ryan Hollingshead, one of the best outside backs we've ever seen, Zach Lloyd, who got into the United States team, Atiba Harris, who was a starter for his country, Menor Figueroa played for Honduras for 1,000 times, Aubrey David played for TNT, Jesse Gonzalez and Chris Seitz in goal. So like those three teams right there are clearly way better than what Dallas is feeling right now. I just think in the end, Dan Hunt is confusing cost with actual talent, because Alan Velasco cost $8 million and Peter Musa cost $10 million, and they're paying Jesus Ferreira a lot of money. Those three guys are
and Paxton a lot
players.
of money, and they spent a lot of money to get Areola and to get Leggett.
But all those guys are years away from either reaching their peak or they're past their peak, right? And those are just like, and then you look at the defense, it's a shambles other than Martin Paz. You have 4 or 5 guys back there, none of whom are within light years of playing for a national team. The midfield across the board, other than Yaramendi, is light years from being key significant. I mean, Liam Frazier's the most big profile guy they have left after Paxton going out, which is nuts that that's what you're comparing to some of these other teams Dallas has had. Mm-hmm. It's just not even close to being one of the best teams they've ever had.
And then Dan's other somewhat curious answer was, well, what do you need to change about how this team is playing?
What has made this club so successful the last couple of years is being able to score enough goals and defend well. We've been one of the best defenses in the league. And I think if we go back to our roots of defending well and creating chances, we'll climb right back up the table.
Yeah. He just described Nico Ball.
You just, That, because remember the last time we were sitting here listening to you pontificate about your situation, you had a really shitty defense run by Luchi Gonzalez. That's why you hired Nico Estevez.
Yeah.
And by the way, the really good defense that you're talking about is the hallmark of this team, again, was Nico Estevez.
Yeah. I mean, later on, he talked about the XG and how they need to score goals and all that stuff. But literally, you know,
Wait, hold on one second.
Yeah.
I got to ask you guys a question. If you ask Dan Hunt to explain how XG works, do either one of you think he could do it correctly?
He called it like the what did he say, Dan? He called it the marquee stat, or like he used a word for it. And
this is the reason why I'm asking this question.
He called it the most telling statistic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I don't think it's that telling at all. It's usable as a macro, like state of game kind of thing. And it really only works in a big picture, like long-term way. And it's like, I don't know that he gets it. So it's like, when they hired Nico in the first place, it was all about, we got to build a defense. And in this one, they doubled down with, well, we have a defense, we just need to keep it, but we just need to score more. I mean, I guess that's fundamentally true, I suppose. I mean, it really is what you need to do, is don't let them score and score more. So fair enough, I guess. But
that's like the old Bobby Robson quote about, you'll win 100% of the games that you score more than your opposition, or whatever it is.
yeah, basically. What's the goal today? Well, to score more than them. That's what we're going to try and do. Yeah.
God, it was so crazy. Although I have to say, I thought Dan spoke better than I've seen him speak publicly in some time. He seemed like he had become kind of a grizzled veteran at this particular event. And Zanata didn't look as deer in the headlights as I remember him looking the last time he was sitting here, having to sack now his second straight manager in his tenure.
If we look at like the macro level of what Dan Hunt said, I will buy into the macro thoughts. It wasn't trending in the right direction. That's true. They do need to create more chances and score more goals. That's also true. So he's right about those two things in a macro sense. I just thought it was particularly funny that basically he described we need to play Nico ball as what they needed to do to win. So it's just ironic.
Yeah, I did. I actually pulled the numbers up on Zanata's time since he's been here. He essentially is running exactly at 500.
I mean, that gets you in the playoffs.
He's had three seasons with double-digit wins, and he's about to get his fourth season with double-digit losses since he's taken over his whatever title he has in this role. Speaking of Zanata, I think it was you, Buzz, or maybe somebody asked him to try to help answer the curious question of how in the world this roster got as goofed up as it did, knowing that the manager wanted to play a new formation.
Yeah, that was me. I asked him if there was a disconnect between the 3-4-3 and the talent acquisition. Here's what he said.
Of course, we don't. Every player acquisition, every discussion we have, and every player we bring, we discuss with the coach, and we have his yes before we sign the players and before we bring player X or player Z. And Nico's, he mentioned to us the formations, that the way he wanted to play with the formations, and we based on that to bring the players. I disagree. I think we have a roster with options in all the positions, where with enough talent to be playing, even missing the players we are, which are players that are key. The only one that we were not expecting to miss this season was Paxton. This was the surprise we had this year. Alan and Giovanni, we knew we were not going to have them for the first semester. But still, the players we brought, the investment we made, and we believe we should be in a better place than we are right now.
This is where we're going to have to agree to disagree, because I don't think that that's true. Like, his evaluation of his roster and the positions they can play and the way they can play is completely different than mine. I think their defense is deficient. I think they're lacking in multiple positions that are necessary to play this way that they want to play. And so that's, at the end of the day, sometimes it just comes down to different evaluations. And it's easy for me to say all that because I'm not the one that has a record out there of like what I've won and lost. I can only say that, like, we have all, ever since we've been doing this, we always sort of, we identify the problems, and when those problems occur, we go, look, yeah, exactly what we said. And that happened again. This season, this winter coming in, we identified what the problems were, and those problems have been exactly true and exactly visible on the field. And they're still telling us no. So basically, in a way, he threw Nico under the bus here. Like, he says, no, we're good enough. Our roster's good enough. We have enough players. We have the right players. They should have been better than they were. Okay, that's the coach. So that question and another question I asked following up, I basically was giving him the chance to either take culpability or hang out the coach to dry. And he didn't do it directly, but he basically hung the coach out to dry.
Buzz, Dan, could this roster as it stands right now win USLC?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, it's comparatively not a great standard to MLS. Look at the players that Quill's brought into New Mexico that are starting regularly that couldn't get a sniff at Dallas. That's, that is the difference. You go back to that Tampa Bay game. Yeah, that they played out of their skins, but it wasn't exactly, the moments that FC Dallas kind of got their heads out their asses. You could see there was a difference in quality just in terms of fitness, a clinical nature, that sort of like.
Okay. Buzz, do you think they'd win USLC?
Oh yeah.
This current, not the roster with the missing, not the roster with the missing pieces as it stands in this particular moment.
Yeah, I do.
Really? Okay.
I'm with Ben Olsen when he talked about the gap between those teams. You can lose a one-off game. It happens. We've seen across the board in many leagues around the world, you have giant killer moments where some team that's fourth division knocks off a Premier League team, whatever. Crazy stuff happens, but when you get into the grind of a season, and this is why most leagues in the world don't count on playoffs. They count on the grind of the season to determine who the best team is, because that's the way it works in soccer. So I think they would win the USL. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this team, what kind of improvements we see in terms of what they do with the ball once they get past midfield. Because I still contend, as I've been saying since last year, this team just does not look like one that knows what to do with the ball once they get past midfield, and I'm not convinced that is in large part just because of the quality of the players on the team and not everything to do with the coach. But I guess we'll find out soon.
Well, what I would say to that would be that I definitely think it's about the quality of the players that were on the field. But I think if you used a different formation and you fielded more actual midfielders, that you wouldn't find that to be the case. You would find that they would be better at knowing what to do with the ball. It wouldn't be, again, they wouldn't climb to the top of the West. They would just
It's
be
relative.
middle of the pack. Everything's relative. All that's still much better than USLC. It would look like, they would be up there with Portland and Colorado and some of those teams are right in the middle, as they almost always are. FC Dallas, right there in the middle of the West. That's where they would be.
So I thought it was interesting also, Zanata talked about getting players time that hadn't been given a lot of time in terms of younger players, and which also felt like a shot at Luccin. You know what I mean?
Not so much, because Luccin would play kids and bring them through. I think it's a shot at Nico. Look, we all sat here on this podcast and talked about when Nico was hired that it might be the wrong hire because of the club's DNA. Right? We were on the record about all that, and that turned out to be true. Like, his definition of what a kid is and the kids that he was willing to trust, was only one or two of them like in their low 20s, not the pathway that, one of the reasons North Texas Soccer Club is so good is because there's 7 homegrowns down there playing, and the guys that are the younger signings, not even homegrowns, that aren't playing for the first team because he refused to play them. So, both Dan Hunt and Zanata and Luccin talked about that pathway, and Peter's answer to that was like, oh yeah, we're definitely playing kids, and gonna play. It won't be every game, won't be right away, but they're absolutely returning back to that DNA, because again, we talked about this a bunch. That homegrown ability to come through and provide roster pieces that are above average, that don't cost you anything because they're homegrowns, was so pivotal to how this team was relatively competitive into the middle or the middle top sort of section of the standings year after year after year. You quit doing that, it's not surprising your team fell off.
Well, it's also it's one of the things that made this team interesting and compelling to follow, because I think one of the weird things or side effects of the Nico Estevez era is that when they put him in place, not only did he stop playing kids and the senior team stopped being a shop window, they also, I think, Buzz, it's not unfair to say they've allowed the academy to no longer be the best academy in this country, and there's been a significant fall off in that part of the club as well. And so over the course of the last couple of years, 3 to 4 years, all of the things that really made this team interesting has kind of gone out by the wayside. And I think that's really what this team and this organization needs to get back to, because what's also happened is that it's really exposed the Hunts as owners is just kind of a mid-tier MLS organization, because they don't have the financial ambition to go beyond that. And so that's what no matter who ends up taking this gig or whatever ends up happening, I hope they go back to that business model, because that to me was fun to watch. This is really awful.
Well, it could turn out that like 99 to 03 was just like this insane bubble, but I don't really think it is. I look at these younger teams play in the academy, and I see just boatloads of talent. The thing that's happened that's been the most problematic, that makes the FC Dallas Academy look like it's no longer the best of the best, was that the moving of players up has stopped. The pushback of the current homegrowns down into North Texas has pushed any 19s or 17s back down into the academy. There's no academy kids playing for the North Texas right now. There's kids that have signed professional contracts that are hybrid deals, that are straight home North Texas deals as they come out of the 18s. That's not what I mean. I mean the Michael Corcoran playing at 14 with North Texas. That's what stopped. Or guys playing up even in a couple of like everyone is playing. Pretty much everyone, like 99% of everyone, is playing in their actual real defined class all the way up and through down the academy. Well, the problem is for the truly elite players, they're now playing against people that they're better than, which is not what you want. You want the truly elite guys playing against guys that are better than them, because that's how you get better. You take Lionel Messi at 18 and he plays for Barcelona. That's of course a crazy aberration. Maybe even at 16 when he first broke through, perhaps. But it's like, that's the kind of idea that you want to have happening. And that pipeline is completely stagnated. And that's why people are like, oh, FC Dallas is not any good anymore, right? Because it's not true. Every single FC Dallas team qualified for the playoffs. I think they're one of a few teams that did that. They're in the top rankings of win percentage across every single age group in the academy. They're still one of the elite 3 or 4 academies out there. It just doesn't look like it does 4 years ago when they have like 12 national team players playing for national teams, right? Like over the last weekend, like they did, you know.
So that leads us to the fact that the replacement is, as we've said multiple times here, Peter Luccin, who I didn't realize how long he had been with the club. I didn't realize he'd been with the club more than 10 years. That's ridiculous that it was 10 years ago he came in here and essentially sat on the bench for most of his time as a player.
Hey, be fair. He sat on the physio table.
Yeah, okay, fair. Yes. My favorite Peter Luccin story is that we all thought he was this incredibly slow battleship of a player at the MLS level.
Yeah.
And then we had a media game a few years ago, and he came out there, and he blew past me with the ball, and just like there was no chance I was ever going to catch up with him.
Yeah.
And it was one of those cold stone reminders of the difference between a professional player and some knucklehead like me that runs around a couple of times a week.
He
It's
was two or
unbelievable.
3 years out of playing.
Yes.
And he ran circles around all of us,
Yes.
laughing, and
Yes.
scored like 7 goals in 20 minutes.
Yes.
It was the biggest slap in the face of like, you idiots are so far removed from a real professional athlete. It's like,
Yes.
unreal. Yeah.
As I'm struggling to try to do anything to get anywhere close to him, I'm thinking to him, "Holy crap, that's Peter Luccin." He was like incredibly slow when he played in MLS. That's
So
all I
bad,
could think of.
So funny.
It was so bad, such a bad smack of reality. Well, anyway, he is the new manager, and I thought, I want to say this straight up. I thought his press conference, he spoke really well. I liked his attitude. I liked his vibe. I liked his energy, and I liked his answer, Buzz, to your question on what his style was.
I like to play football. I like to play football, and when I say that I like to play football, it's a complete football. So I think that we can see a lot of things. We can see ball on the ground, we can see ball in the air. It's going to depend what the opponent is giving us. So it's very important that game is a game of adjustment too. So I want to help them to adjust. It's not just about the coach. It's about them to see and to read what is going on the field. I want to make sure that the people are coming here with the family, they can see attractive football.
You tried, Buzz, to get him to explain to you what kind of changes he would make, and he wasn't giving up the ghost.
No. He literally said he's not going to give St. Louis any information for this weekend. That was funny.
So what do you think he's going to do?
Well, he directly cited 2 coach influences, and it was Carlos Bianchi, the Argentine coach, and a guy named Roland Corbis, who I looked him up, has been a coach, first team coach, pro coach in France for 5,000 years, coached like 20 different clubs, and so not having really watched those guys play or coach, I tried to dig around and find things about them, like articles about them or things that listed the kind of play they have. And it talked about things like individual responsibility leading to a collective quality. And specifically, both of them were mentioned as being preferences towards the 4-3-3, just various versions of 4-3-3, whether it be a single pivot or double pivot. And so I, for one, of course, hope that Peter meant as much tactically, in those formations, whether it be a double or a single, or just even just, I would be happy with the mentality and the individual responsibility part and the energy part as I would be with the tactics, because obviously I think this team would be much better in a back 4. And a 4-3-3 is their most native natural formation for the roster they have. So he didn't want to commit to much tactical context. He wouldn't really get into that. So hopefully, next week, of course, we'll be able to have open training again, and I'll be able to see, and we'll obviously see against St. Louis what his preference is. And he did talk about adaptability and being able to recognize what you're against and change up against what you're up against. And that's a really nice quality too, if they have that. So, you're right that everything he said was nice. I like that he got really choked up when he talked about how when he first went to the academy as a coach, he coached U12 and then for youth and then U13. And now that he's the head coach, a couple of guys on that team are now in his team. We're in training. And he mentioned Tarek Scott and Anthony Ramirez and Nolan, of course, too, but Nolan's out of town, so he didn't mention him. But I thought it was kind of fun. So 10 years later, those kids are now in his first pro team he's got.
Dan, what are your thoughts on Luccin and his shot at actually winning this gig?
I mean, if you look at his playing resume, it's phenomenal. He's played for some of the best teams in the world with some of the best players of all time. Part of the golden generation for France, missing out on the World Cup itself. But, if he can translate that into coaching, which, not everyone can, that'd be an amazing feat. And I think the things that he has done with the academy teams and being on the bench in MLS for 4 or 5 years now, that bodes pretty well because with Luccin, we talked about he'd never even been on an MLS bench and suddenly he's thrust into that. With Nico, it was kind of he'd done a little bit with the crew, but it was more US national team, not so much day-to-day involvement. So you've got someone that kind of has been in the trenches for a few years. I will say, though, my favorite thing was when Peter was talking about giving opportunities to young players, and he listed a bunch of names, and he didn't list Nolan. And then I feel this kick from behind me. It was Buzz, and then he whispers, "But what about Nolan?"
I think he didn't mention him because he's at the U20 team, captaining that team. It's out of sight, out of mind. He'd just come out of practice. Hopefully he didn't forget about Nolan. I mean, Nolan was in his team as when he was his great 13 team that he had, and Nolan was in there. So I'm sure he has good feelings about Nolan too.
But isn't part of the, and maybe this is out of sight, to use your phrase, Buzz, out of sight, out of mind. My perception is that there's a significant difference in quality in the young players available to the manager today versus the young player available to Oscar and or Luccin, because the club has sold all their best players off by and large.
Yeah.
Is that true? Am I right? Is that perception correct?
I think that there's a little bit of misperception there. It is definitely true that they've sold off a lot of great players. I mean, if Tanner would have been here the last couple of years, if they hadn't burned out Thomas Roberts, they sold off Pepe, they've sold off Chris Richards, they sold off Justin Shea. Like there would be some guys that would be, other than Paxton and Jesus, that core like 24 to 8 to 20
Cervania,
would have 5 or 6
Cerrillo.
guys. Cerrillo traded away, Cervania traded away. I mean, there would be other guys if they hadn't gotten rid of them all.
Right.
And then you remember, we've talked about this before, the 04 year for whatever reason, and Luccin even said it was across the whole Texas was this way. It was a down year, other than Antonio. I mean, we weren't even sure about him until late. There were no field players in that class. And then the class behind is Nolan Norris and Tarek Scott. And then Tarek blew his knee out, and Nolan's changing positions. So, there are other pros in that class that have been signed in North Texas that they just haven't progressed through yet because the pipeline has stalled. And then you go to the classes behind that, like ordinarily, like we should be talking about the 06s that are coming through. We should have already seen a guy that's a U17 now. Like no U17 in the current group has been like moved up to North Texas even, let alone FC Dallas. And that's Pepe signed as a U17 for North Texas and then FC Dallas within their first season. So like, yes, none of those guys are Pepe, but at the same time, like they could have had Ice Stone as an 06, right? So like they've missed on a couple of guys. They've had a couple of guys get hurt. They had a bad class, and then they sold off a bunch. So there's this little gap. Absolutely. I think, as Dan Hunt mentioned, Dan Hunt said that he's got a decade's worth of talent in the academy. I really think that's true. I think that how many times have we said this, that if you can produce 1 or 2 players a year out of your academy, that is phenomenal. That's like a world-class academy. Mm-hmm. And last year we have Tarek and Nolan, and this next year coming up, there'll be 1 or 2 more guys, so it's just a question of refilling this gap that was created by selling and by a couple of misses. I think they'll get there, or it may just be as I said, 99 to 00 was the greatest generation in the history of anyone's academy. I don't think it is, but I think that, it's very good. Yeah.
So I was going through the official senior roster, and I was trying to think of, well, who are some of these kids we want to see in line. And I got to admit, there's like at least one or two. I don't even know who is number 34, Alejandro
Urzua.
Who is that?
Urzua was the best midfielder after Matthew Corcoran left. He was the best midfielder in that class, and he bossed that team. He was the best player in that team. Since he has signed a homegrown contract, he's gotten hurt a bunch. So he's barely played for North Texas. So he's a very, very skinny kid, very thin. He needs to toughen up body-wise, put on some muscle, because he just gets wrecked and keeps getting hurt. I think he's a talented player. He had a hybrid deal. He signed one of those deals that starts at North Texas and transitions. So, but they have this now. You can just have unlimited homegrown. So, I actually thought he was one of the guys I thought was appropriate to be signed. He was the best player in his class out of the academy.
Okay. So, but back to my point, who of these kids should we expect Luccin to play? And my first question is, should we expect Anis Sali to start showing up and getting senior time, or is he just a bust?
He did name check him.
Yeah, he name checked Solly. He did. He mentioned specifically Solly. He mentioned Tarek Scott, who's the leading scorer for North Texas.
I heard him say that.
Yeah, he mentioned Pondeka. Do you know who Thomas Pondeka is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, former futsal national team player that they found an open tryout. He's one of North Texas's better players. He mentioned Anthony Ramirez. Anthony Ramirez is on a hybrid deal. So Anthony Ramirez is not actually technically a homegrown yet. So he can't – you'd have to, quote-unquote, sign him up to a homegrown deal or loan him up to a homegrown deal in order to actually play him, even though he mentioned him. He's on the North Texas part of a hybrid deal, which there are some other guys that fall in that category too. So the one I think you should watch for that he did not mention is Diego Garcia. But of course, Diego Garcia is not capable of being a homegrown. He's the kid from El Paso Locomotive, who everyone thinks very highly of. So he's North Texas's best player, despite the fact that Tarek Scott's the leading scorer. Diego Garcia is their best player. So he might be one for the next window, perhaps, because you'd have to do an actual transfer to get him up from your North Texas team. But of the guys that are down there now, that's probably it, that are like ready. There's some guys that over the next couple seasons will be worth discussing when we get there, but right now those are the ones that are on the cusp. I mean, and of course, Isaiah Parker is a Generation Adidas player that's down there, but he has Marco Farfan and Sam Junka ahead of him at left back. So, he'll actually finally get a real chance because Nico Estevez is gone, but he's got a tough road even at that.
So coming up next, so Dallas has St. Louis in town this weekend on Saturday night. What I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask the order of this question. I guess we'll just start with Buzz. What do you anticipate or what do you expect to see out of a Luccin-led Dallas on Saturday?
Well, they talked a lot about energy multiple times. I think I already said this, that was the buzzword of the day. And we joke that these press conferences have buzzwords. Like the first one was it's a process. And then the second year from Nico, it was mentality. Well, this time it was energy. They all mentioned that word over and over and over again, which is weird because basically that's the idea of like, we're going to bring in a cheerleader and rile everybody up and we're going to be good. It doesn't work that way. Not at a pro level. So it's
at least not past one or two games.
Yeah, you get a bounce. You'll get a coach bounce for sure. Everyone will show up and play hard. All the players like Luccin. I think he definitely falls under the player coach category where everybody likes him. Everybody respects his background. One of the interesting things about this scenario is actually that I've never seen him be a head coach. Like we joked that he has been in the trenches on the first team a bunch as an assistant. So he's seen MLS, but unlike Lucci, we saw Lucci be a head coach in the academy. We saw Oscar be a head coach in the academy, and then with Colorado, we've seen some of these other guys be head coaches. Luccin, when he did U12s and U13s, I never saw him because I don't go that far down watching games. So I've never seen the man head coach. When he was in the system back then, he played a 4-3-3 because Oscar's first team played a 4-3-3. So we have no idea tactically what he prefers. We have no idea what he's like as a head coach on the bench. We want to see him be an assistant over there. So we're kind of on a blank slate. It's going to be fun for us to sort of learn about him, about how he coaches and how his tactics are. His answer about he wants to play good total football. Well, that sounds fantastic, but how does that actually demonstrate on the field? So we're going to all learn. I mean, my big hope, of course, is we're going to see a back four because this team in a back three to me is a disaster. The last 2 years when the defense was much better, back four, right? This year the defense has been bleeding, back three. Maybe back three would be better if you had two great sixes in front of you, but you don't. Maybe that's
or if
part
you
of
had
it.
two really good center backs.
Yeah.
But you don't.
Well, that's the thing is, I never felt they replaced Jam when he left, let alone had an extra back for the back three. As good as Sam Junk has been, and he's been fantastic, based on the expectations for where he was coming in, he might have outplayed Ibiaga in a lot of ways. That neither one of those guys should be your starting center back in a system. They should be playing. Ibiaga should be on the bench, but Sam should maybe be filling in other places, more like a Ryan Hollingshead, play everywhere kind of guy.
So, Dan, I wonder from your perspective, what does this do in terms of the level of pressure on the players? Does this potentially give them some reason to kind of relax or play better because now they're not worried about? Does anybody really have any expectations for this season at this point? And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out.
I think the pressure's going to maintain on the players just because they're professional athletes. That's how they go about their business. You look at players like Leggett and Areola, and maybe there's a pressure to succeed and kind of make themselves worthy of their contracts or put themselves in the shop window for a trade or something along those lines. Certainly some of the guys that had that good relationship with Nico, who had maybe played in the national team previously, their messages on social media show that they've kind of, they're feeling some of the blame for that, and they're going to naturally give themselves a little bit of pressure there. But a fresh start certainly does open things up. Everything seemed very happy, very jovial at training. A lot of the guys, came over to Buzz and I and said hi. Everyone, new beginnings can be an enjoyable thing to be a part of.
There definitely will be some people that have been frozen out. They're going to feel like they now have a shot that they never had.
Okay. So to kind of wrap it up, Dan, what do you think will happen moving forward for the rest of the season? I don't mean a prediction per se, but do you think the team plays better at this point, or do you think it's pretty much a different version of the same thing?
I think it'd be more expansive. If you're an interim coach, you've got to impress, and impress can be play terribly boring football and grab a bunch of draws, or it can be, hey, I died on my, I lived and died by the sword, won a few 4-3, lost a few 4-3, but it was entertaining as hell, and we gave it a go. Peter said he's committed to a more beautiful football. I think that's what you're going to see is something a bit more appealing, a bit more attack minded. They've obviously given him the job, and they've talked about tightening up the defense. But in answer to one of the questions I asked, Dan Hunt said Peter will be laser focused on increasing XG. So if that's the remit he's been given primarily, they've got to play something a little bit better than bunker ball.
Buzz, what do you think's going to happen?
Well, I hope we can take him at his word, as Dan says, that he's going to try and play more attacking. I'll be happy if they just make the defensive choice every time, that they'll be more adventurous and be more willing to try things, give a little more freedom to try and get forward. All that would make me very happy. If we play a few more kids, see some things look, the last however long, things have been going really, really poorly. And we saw the same formation all the time. And we almost always saw the same people all the time, minus health. It's at some point, try some different things. We kept waiting for Nico to try different stuff. And he was so married to that shape and so married to his defensive first players that he never tried anything and shook it up. So just give us a shake up. I'll be happy with that, honestly. Just try and open it up and play a little bit. You don't have to score boatloads of goals. I don't mind teams that are somewhat defensive. I'm okay with that. But try to play soccer. And Luccin says he wants to play soccer. Great, then give us that, and we'll be pretty happy. Particularly with a short window of half of a season, when we're trying to judge him, we're trying to judge as a team moving in the right direction. You probably don't have to go crazy because you're going to have the same players. You just got to get them playing in a way that is more balanced, right? Not defensive first, a two-way game, and just try and play some good soccer and see what happens. Put guys in positions to improve the level of play. Don't have 6 defenders in midfield. Try and open it up a little bit. Know that pause is good, so I can take a few risks. Maybe on the outside with some guys getting forward. Finally, we'll see. I wish we knew a little more about Luccin's tactics, but I understand why he didn't want to talk about it. Hopefully we'll get some good stuff.
I think one of the things you just said there was perfect. You can be more you can be defensive, focus on that, but also play well. Nobody ever said that Oscar Pereira's style was boring, but he was happy to sit back and soak up everything and get you on the counter all day long. It wasn't just sit back and then, we'll pass it around in the midfield and then we'll pass it back and then we'll cough up possession and then we'll defend some more.
I mean, we're about to go into the hottest part of the year, so I don't mind like a team that doesn't want to own the ball the whole time because that'll really wear you out in the heat. I don't mind a team that'll let the other team have the ball for good stretches. We all know that in the modern game, possession isn't as geared towards success as it used to be. There's a whole lot of really good teams that don't overpossess the other team, and here it burns you out if you do anyway. So, that's not the measuring stick for quality soccer. The measuring for quality soccer is, chance creation and diminishing for them and taking advantage of moments when they happen and being adventurous to try to play. And that's what I hope for. And I have no idea if we're going to get it or not.
Do you think they make any significant move in the transfer window?
Yeah, unfortunately. I said, yeah, unfortunately, I think they do. I think for sure that they'll go after a center back, and they'll definitely try and replace Paxton.
But isn't that what we wanted them to do?
It is and it isn't. I hope that they replace Paxton without, with the understanding that Paxton will still be here, right? You can't just go, you spend a whole boatload of money and then you run into this problem of now I've got a whole boatload of money in the same player again. And if you go get a great center back, that's fine. My only problem with that is it better be a left-footed center back that's the answer for like the next 4 years. Well, that plays back into the idea that what if Luccin's not the coach? Luccin's the coach right this minute, but like you're going to go out and get they remember what that quote I played. 3 or 4 guys give their input, and then we come up with a list, and the coach says I want that one, and then I go try and get him. Well, are you going to go try and get the guy Luccin wants, and then what? But not the coach.
But they need a left-footed center back no matter who the coach is.
I think that's true. But there's different styles of center backs and different profiles, and there's different qualities, and there's different kinds of where they're from and what kind of game they have. All that's a factor. What if you get Reto Ziegler, a very intelligent but slow, a foot center back, and all of a sudden the next coach you hire wants to play a track meet style, vertical, fast as hell, flying up and down the field. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, because Luccin is the interim, it won't kill me if they want to wait for any big, huge signings until next winter. The problem, of course, is the best players or more impactful players are likely to be available this window because this is when everybody's doing all their moves. So it will not surprise me to see them go get a center back and or a big midfielder, both.
What do you think we get out of Jesus Ferreira moving forward?
I don't know. Jesus, I don't know how Jesus feels about Peter. I mean, hopefully he feels some culpability about Nico, but he didn't exactly tweet out anything about Nico or whatever. So I'd like to see us get a Jesus playing forward out of Jesus rather than wingback. If you take a look at the comedic heat map he had last game, for example, which was hysterically funny. If Luccin can figure out a way to get him to quit trying to be a midfielder or a center back or a wing back, that would be awesome. I'd be happy to get him to get Jesus to try and be a striker. And it may be that the way to do that is to play a 2-striker system of some kind, so Jesus knows he's a forward rather than when you put him in a wing and then somebody goes like outside in and all of a sudden he's like, oh, I better cover back at center back. You know what I mean? So it's like,
in general, I think it'll be interesting to see how he reacts like mentality wise. Cause he's been a little bit mopey. All the players have always had a really good rapport with Luccin. When I did something on Nkosi a couple of years ago, he talked so much about the rapport the guys have with Luccin, how they're always joking about the different teams, different players, different styles and stuff. Peter's own playing career as much as their own, and that span he had under Luccin, where he was kind of like the passing coach, and guys like Nkosi kind of picked up that side of their game. You talk about FC Dallas not being a particularly good passing team out of the back. He's a pretty good guy to be leading the charge in that sense.
Question. Hypothetical. Because you're unlikely to find a buyer in the international market for Jesus right now at a dollar value that you probably would want for him, or are interested in buying him because he makes so much money. Would you be willing to trade him within the league?
That would depend on what I got back in return, of course. I mean, I'm not anti that idea. It would always come to any trade. It would always come down to the value in return. If we ended up with another 2003 LA Galaxy trade, I'd be livid. But if you ended up with a good value move, they got
you might want to remind everybody what that trade was.
Specifically, it was Paul Broom and Ryan Suarez and one other person I can't remember who it was, for Easy Ezra Hendrickson, and who retired like a year later, and like somebody else that played 5 games. It's one of the worst trades. I don't have it in front of me, but it's considered the worst trade in club history, pretty much unanimously by people that have paid attention long enough.
Right.
It's an abysmal trade, but they traded like 3 starters for 1 starter who then retired. So at the time, a trade, by the way, approved by our good friend Andy Swift. But he at the time, the coach was the tech manager, basically a tech director, basically. So like Andy, to his credit in a way,
I can't wait to give him crap next time I see him.
He gave Jeffries the chance to try and salvage that season. I want to do this trade. Okay, I'm going to back you up, because that was a league-owned team at the time.
Right,
remember,
right.
It was transitioning to Hunt ownership, but the Hunts weren't operating. Despite the fact they made South Lake happen, they weren't making the day-to-day decisions yet. Andy still was. So that trade is abysmal. And maybe if you get Dan in on something here, I'll look it up while we're talking. But so that's trades are fine if the value's there.
I just wonder, I think about Jesus and his opportunity and where his head is at, and the fact that he hasn't found his international, his move abroad move. He's lost his slot on the national team. I do regularly, as I watch him play, I do begin to wonder where his brain is at all at this point. And if there is this idea that maybe Dallas could get a really good deal out of some team that's really taking a shot at MLS Cup and maybe has an injured striker or attacker and needs a replacement, that he would be a really nifty opportunity for somebody. And if Dallas would be willing to take that opportunity up and let him go. And one of those change of scenery kind of opportunities for everybody that everybody kind of maximizes out of. I don't know. That's what also makes me wonder if we, to Dan's point, what we get out of him with the change of coach and a less negative, grindy kind of team, if he can actually bring something to the table. So, yeah, we'll see. All right, so St. Louis on Saturday, we start the new energetic era of the rest of this particular season. I have no idea what happens from here on out, but it can't get any worse. I think that's the...
Yeah, we'll go with that.
I mean, really, I guess it could get a little worse, but I don't know if it could get really much worse or make it or give us more reasons to be more apathetic about this particular season. At least now there's something to pay attention to, right?
Well, even, regardless of the results being terrible, you've got the Apple announcers calling out the team and coaching staff because of the style being that boring. This year I've missed a lot of the away games. Just had some things on. Case in point, past weekend I was at a wedding. I was like, okay, I missed the 2 LA games. I'm definitely gonna go back and watch this game. I'm gonna, even if I have to stay up through the night and watch it, I will do that. And then I heard how terribly dull it was. And I was like, I am not going to do that. Why would I do that? Why would I subject myself to that?
Yeah, I mean, after seeing them play in the 2LA games in person and then going back and considering watching, as I said earlier, watching the Minnesota game, I saw some of the stats tweeted out, and I was like, why in the... Yes, exactly the same reaction, Dan. Why would I subject myself to that? That's... Especially when you hear stories about how they're passing the ball backwards in the 87th minute. Just weird stuff. And
I did find it funny. There was something that was tweeted out that you put in a Discord, one of the types of heat maps about, ball movement, attacking position and that. And it looked an awful lot like a penis. that was inserting itself into the FC Dallas goal, not the opposition end.
Hey, speaking of which, you want to hear that Galaxy trade?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Paul Broom, who was your left wing back starter, Ryan Suarez.
I think we need to give Dan a Rorschach chest, by the way. Okay.
Center back, rookie of the year candidate, center back, right back starter, and Antonio Martinez, who was one of the assist leader on the team. Those three guys were traded for Ezra Hendrickson, who at the end of the season signed with Charleston Battery in the USL instead of staying with Dallas, and Gavin Glinton, who played 10 games for the Burn before they had to do an injury buyout and then sat out of the game till 2006 and then joined the Charleston Battery. So they stocked up the Charleston Battery by giving away 3 starters.
Yep, I remember that trade.
Yeah, that's the worst trade in club history.
Oh, Andy Swift. Well, the other thing is I thought, now this was the move that I was a little surprised by. I know John Gall and Peter Luccin are buddies, because what I didn't know is that they had kind of arrived, or they worked together initially. But after, and I confess I've watched none of North Texas this year, but I am aware that they are undefeated, and he's having a tremendous season with them. Are you surprised they moved him away from that to come do this assistant gig?
Because in hindsight, no. Because Peter, when they said, who do you want on your staff, the first person he named was John Gall. He started with that. He said, give me that guy. And then we all know that the MLS assistant job is regarded more highly than a MLS Next Pro head coach job. That's the order. Quill went from MLS Next Pro to MLS assistant, and now he's a USL Championship head coach. John Gall's making a bet. Same thing. MLS Next Pro head coach. I'm moving up to an MLS bench. That's better. So in hindsight, that's fine. And the other part of that coin is that Michel has been ready to be the North Texas coach for a bit now. He just has not had the licenses, but we've watched the way he's coached up 4-0 into the best team in Dallas. It's not a pro team. And the work he's done with the North Texas has been exemplary. And on the other side note is the best academy coach has now moved up to assistant on the North Texas team, a job, by the way, that he had before 2 years ago. But his name is Alex Aldaz, and he's been working in the U.S. U17 team as an assistant. So he was in danger of getting poached. So they've managed to keep him in the academy, I think, by moving him up to the North Texas assistant. So those are all quality coaching decisions in and of themselves. And I'm fine with all that. The problem for North Texas is going to be if Luccin really does take, 4, 5, 6 of these home runs back up to the first team, it's going to be a lot harder for North Texas to win all these games. So, Michel has work cut out for him, but it's good moves in general.
Okay. Well, interesting. And then we also, just because it is that time of year, the Mauro Diaz Argentinian club, not Mauro Diaz. Good Lord, what is going on with me today?
Well, I brought him up earlier, so that's why you had him in the brain.
Yes, I'm sorry. The Alan Velasco Argentinian club flirting is in full effect now, although I don't know why anybody would want to flirt with Alan Velasco with nobody having any idea of what version of Alan anybody's about to get
that's
back.
my fault. That's my fault that happened.
Why?
Wait, you injured Alan Velasco?
No, it's my fault that link to Boca happened today, because when we went down and I went out to practice, I shot a 5-second clip of Alan Velasco doing ball work with cones and flags, and I put it on the internet. And some Argentine news sources were like, "Alan's back," and then 3 hours later, here came Alan Velasco to Boca Juniors. So it's my fault that happened. That happened.
Damn you, Buzz! How did he look?
It looks like a guy. I'll tell you, I'm going to tell this story in danger of them getting mad at me, but Dan and I were walking behind Alan Velasco. And if you've ever done any kind of extensive physical exertion without having been in shape, like it happens to me, for example, when I go skiing, and at the end of the day, your legs are so blown out that they kind of quiver and vibrate as you walk. You know what I'm talking about? That blown out, like, oh, my legs are so shot that my muscles go, oh, and they get
I feel like that every day.
Yeah, like probably for you when you play soccer against 20-year-olds. So Dan and I are walking behind Alan Velasco, and we're watching him walk. And the right leg is fine, left leg goes down, the whole thing quivers. Right leg goes down, fine, left leg goes down, the whole thing quivers. So he looked like a guy that had gone skiing for 10 hours when he just was out there for like 20 minutes. It shows that how far he is, even though he's now running and doing some cutting and doing some ball work, that leg is, months from being ready to take a hit to be out there cutting at a professional level.
And the atrophy in that left leg as well. Like his right calf is so much bigger than his left. And when you go back to, speak of the devil, Mauro Diaz, that was his problem. As a young player, he did a hamstring, one leg, one leg was overdeveloped, the other one was underdeveloped because of the way he came back from the injury, and that led to all those upper leg injuries that he had for several years before coming to FC Dallas and at FC Dallas.
And I'm sure if any real trainer or the club would be like, oh, you guys are making a big deal about that. But this is exactly why the last 2 months of an injury, when you see these clips of him, you go, oh, look how close he is. No, he needs more time. Let's stop trying to push that guy back early when we watch him out there and you're like, he's barely standing up still as he's walking off the field. It's like, let's not get ahead of ourselves in terms of his recovery just because he was kicking a ball.
And has anybody seen Giovanni Jesus?
Well, the word around the campfire is that he's ahead of Allen. I've been told that he had a little scar tissue cleanup, which is very, very normal. I have not seen him out at training in a month and a half, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't. That just means I've been gone a bunch lately. So like the timing of me being at training and the time of him being outside has not coincided. For all I know, he's inside busting out, 300-pound squats or whatever. So, we can't speak to with any specifics beyond that. They tell me he's ahead of where Allen is. I'm actually expecting him from the initial time frame. I expect him to be back this month in training sometime. So he was not out there today, but maybe over the next couple of weeks he will be. So
that's a great new line. Oh, you were gone a long time. Sorry, I was busting out 300-pound squat.
Yeah, he might have been. You never know. He's inside doing something.
Well, I would just tell everybody, since most, Buzz, you and I are day one guys, that this is pretty normal for this club. I think Estevez was the club's 9th manager officially, and we're about to get our 10th manager, and this is just how this thing goes. And just buckle up and enjoy the rest of the season for what it is. I do have a nomination for the famous list that I would like to find out, because on Sunday, I've really debated whether or not this entire season qualifies as an entry for the list. And I think that's TBD. But I do wonder that on Sunday, on the FC Dallas Reddit, on the heels of the firing and the awful performance in Minnesota, somebody from the sales team posted, buy your 2025 season tickets now, lock in your rate posting. And it just felt... really? Now?
Read the room.
Who? Yeah. Does that qualify for the list?
No, I don't think so. Dan thinks it does. Oh, it's 2 out of 3. Then yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if it should.
Different list, but
it's definitely on the read the room list. That's your list, Peter. You're the final judge.
I don't know. It's the list is filled of all sorts of either just bad luck that befell the team or facepalmy kind of moments of self-inflicted awfulness or hilarity. And that just felt really, maybe that's a recency bias thing. Maybe if I let it stew for a few weeks, it won't seem as bad.
I don't think it's so bad.
It's on that sort of level as the $9.11 ticket deal.
Fair.
That's on the list.
Yeah.
then that deserves to be on the list. But that's also a global event historically.
I
That's
think that's
not
on the list.
It should fucking well better be.
Is the 9/11 sales promotion?
I think it's on the list. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm looking. I gotta look. Where is the list? Oh, there it is. The Curious History. If you don't know, if you're listening to the pod, you don't know, you should go to Buzz's website, thirddegree.net, and over on the right-hand column, click on the entry called The Curious History of FC Dallas Burn, a.k.a. The List. And this is a year-by-year collection of the most stunning list of unfortunate incidents, self-inflicted wounds, and every year has at least 2. Some have 7 or 8.
Yeah, you know how many people read that list and go, "This can't be real. You guys have to have made this up." And it's like, no,
yes,
that's real.
no,
Everything on there is real.
Yeah, it's my own personal project to put up here.
Well, 2004 it has nothing. I'm sorry, 2024.
Oh yeah, no, I don't
Yeah.
have 2024 because we haven't. Yeah, there was something earlier this year we talked about putting on the list, but I hadn't decided to do that. What was the year with the 9/11 promotion?
It's 2021. I'm seeing it. 9/11 deal. Yeah, it's the next
it
to
on
last
here?
item on 2021. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Next, entry. Fans are horrified when they receive an email from the ticket sales team offering a deal for $9.11 tickets for the home game against San Jose, played on September 11th.
Oh, because it was the 20th anniversary. Yeah.
By the way, as I mentioned before, for those of you looking for the Buzz Carrick Leaves Town impact, the next transfer window opens July 18th, and I think I'm leaving on like July 14th. So I got it like lined up for everybody. I'll be gone like right exactly when that happens. So I'm sure the moves will be flying.
Crazy. Oh, I
Have you
forgot
ever thought of changing the time if you walkabout?
Well, the timing of the walkabout has to do with my other career, my real job. It doesn't have to do with FC Dallas.
Focus on the important things.
Well, when I get to the point where the FC Dallas is all that's left of my career, then I will change it up, and it'll be probably go somewhere in the winter, not the summer. But
it just dawned on me. I need to remember to always come back to the list if I'm in a really bad, sad, or sour mood and I just need a pick-me-up, because every time I go to this list, I kind of flip through and just pick one to read, and I'm like, oh, shit, I totally forgot about that. That's awesome. This time, it was last year's the storm and the flying letter O that hit the fan in the head.
Peter, you mentioned you and I being here since 1996. And you remember, of course, I was in Boston in 96 working for the Revolution as a Red Hat.
Yep.
But I was still following the Burn, and that was still my team. And my first introduction to them as a team was they came to Boston and played. And both Hugo Sanchez and Alvarez played that day. And, of course, they're very physical and they're very gamesmanship. They're getting into it or whatever. And somebody, probably lawless, cleated Hugo Sanchez on the inside of his thigh so badly that, like, there were you could clearly see like 6 stud marks and these blood trails running down from the marks. And he and Alvarez were at midfield, and Hugo was pulling up his shorts, and Alvarez is gesturing to the crowd to look at the bleeding, as it like right there at midfield in front of like the whole crowd, like egging on the whole stadium about this blood trail. I mean, it was nasty. I've never seen a cleaning like it, but it's like that was my intro to the Dallas Burn at the time, was those two guys. Kicking the snot out of the Revolution. Beto Nevada in Lawless.
Excellent.
Peter, I might need to edit your flying O thing just to say on our own Dan Crooke got hit by a trash can.
Oh, we did.
I thought you got hit by an O.
No, Dan
I didn't.
Fan Colton Stevens.
Right. That's right. Yeah,
got hit by the letter O. Dan got hit by a trash can. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't updated. There was something else that happened earlier this season we were going to throw in as a nomination for the 24. But
that'll come up. Somebody will remember.
I'm sure it's just...
If it's deserving, we'll remember.
You could probably just search for the list in the Discord.
Yeah, or it may just be replacing a center back with a center back when you're down a goal and 8 minutes left in the game. It may just be my personal favorite one, but whatever.
That's not a big deal.
All right, boys. Well, here we go. A whole new era filled with energy and promise.
Well, in addition to this podcast dropping tomorrow, Dan has a fantastic article that he's going to have out tomorrow that everyone should read about Martin Paz. And I've decided I'm going to drop a new T-shirt I've been working on because since Peter Luccin has a high X-dog factor, it feels appropriate to drop this shirt that I'm going to drop. It's nothing to do with dogs, but it's kind of gritty. So I hope everybody likes it.
Did I tell you guys I actually talked to Martin Paz after the LAFC game? I introduced myself to him.
I saw the one where you were talking to him during the game, and lucky you didn't get tackled by security. I saw that picture.
No, what are you talking about?
The one at LAFC when you were like, he's sat on the bench and you're over there talking to him like 2 feet from coach in the middle of the game. That one.
I think you're just making stuff up now.
Oh, that was definitely in the middle of the game. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely in the middle of the game.
No, it was after the game.
Nope. I deny that.
Oh. Like, what are you doing?
I have spoken. I'm trying to get you in trouble.
Oh. No, he was very
How
nice.
can you be more in trouble, Pizza?
Yeah, right. Well, anyway, so he was very nice, by the way. And he was shorter than I thought he would be.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90.com. Celebrate Pride Month with the FC Dallas Pride pre-match jersey, available now in-store or online. And buy before the match this weekend. Supply is limited. And you remember, if you can use code Third Degree at checkout, you get 20% off both in-store and online. In-store, tell me to send us on Soccer90.com. It's code Third Degree. Some exclusions may apply. This week's episode of Third Degree, the podcast, is also brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm. For wills, trust, probate, and business law, call 469-515-2559 or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Boys, here we go. Let's see how the rest of this plays out. Hope everybody enjoys the ride. Dan, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight with all this energy from this new energetic era of energy. I'm going to go have a Celsius followed by a Red Bull and a Monster and a Bang Energy and whatever other crap's out there that's probably going to give you a heart attack at the end of the day.
And a few ED pills.
Oh, sorry, I just heard a few E, and I was like, oh, it's that kind of party, all right.
Buzz, thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm actually quite looking forward to certainly the next short window as we try and figure out what Peter Luccin's all about.
Boy, it will be, at least it'll be interesting.
That'd be fun. That'd probably be fun if nothing else.
Yes, at least for the next few weeks, it'll be interesting. We'll TBD on the rest of the season. And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. Stick with it. Here we go. We'll talk to you next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Energy. Not energy drinks, that's New York Red Bulls.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.